Good evening and welcome to our November 12th Town Council meeting.
Worrying about the scratching. I can only see through.
So, no work session tonight, so we'll get started right away. Just a reminder that before we do, you can go to basalt.net. If you'd like to join the meeting virtually via Zoom, just go to the agenda tab, click on the November 12th meeting packet, and you'll see right on that first page the links to join virtually, and that'll enable you to participate in the meeting that way and make comments, et cetera, versus just watching it on TV. So you're welcome to do that. And with that, I'll ask our town clerk to please call the roll.
Absolutely. Let us begin with Dieter Schindler.
Here.
Angela Anderson.
Here.
Rick Stevens.
Here.
Hannah Berman.
Here.
Thanks, Hannah. Angèle Dupré-Bouchard.
Here.
Ryan Slack.
Here.
And David Knight.
Here.
Wow, the A team is present. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have item 2, our consent agenda, and that's the minutes from October 22nd, 2024, and then item 2B, which is the special event activity permit extension for the Taco Express food truck. So if anybody'd like to pull any of that off, say so. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Mayor, I move the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Yes, absolutely. Let us begin with Dieter Schindler.
Yes.
Hannah Berman.
Oh, we lost the Zoom.
Oh, we lost the Zoom.
Back up.
Recording in progress.
Okay, Hannah's back.
Is she back?
She's muted.
Wasn't sure if that was me or her. I don't see her.
I can hear you again now, but it paused for a minute there.
Yeah, Hannah, we're just doing the roll call for the vote for approving the consent agenda, and you're up.
Yes.
Thank you. Angela Anderson.
Yes.
Rick Stevens.
Yep.
Angèle Dupré-Bouchard.
Yes.
Ryan Slack.
Yes.
And David Knight.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. All right, next up, we have item 3, which is the call to the public. And just a reminder of the ground rules here, you limit your comments to 3 minutes and address your comments directly to me. Identify yourself by name and address when making comments. Please be courteous, civil, and constructive, and we'll make no decision nor take action except to direct the town manager. And just one more item for that. If there's any public hearings tonight, I just ask that you wait till that agenda item and that public hearing to make those respective comments. And with that, I'll open it up if anybody'd like to come up and make public comments. Anybody online? No. Okay, let's move on then. Next up is item 4, mayor and council reports and comments.
I would just like to update everyone on the Root Eye A&S inspections for the year, because we contribute, and it's actually done through CPW and the Forest Service, but we, as a member, contribute $15,000 a year to do it. They did 5,837 inspections. 161 boats were deconned. They found 4 boats with mussels, and that's actually down from last year. Last year they found 17, but there's new inspection points around the state access. So the big one's in Loma, so that catches a lot of the boats coming from Powell. So it's still good, still no mussels up there, and yeah. So good.
Ryan, are there ever issues with paddle boards?
You know, they're starting to talk about that because they have found mussels on the lower Colorado. So just down, so Highline Reservoir shut down, and they're still trying to decontaminate it.
Oh, that's why it's shut down?
And and they found some in there, so there is actually a big push to check your waders, to dry out your waders. So actually at Taylor Creek, at the River Conservancy, I think the River Conservancy's put out 6 to 8 stations to clean your gear. So it's definitely being thought about more, but it's not as prevalent.
Yeah.
Because it mostly holds in like water. So you'd think when you like roll up your paddleboard, it's kind of dries out.
Oh, yeah, got it.
Where like inside the boat, there's like, especially on the weight boats, there's all these bags that hold the water.
yeah.
In your hull, there's water, so.
Yeah, okay.
So, good program, glad we support it.
For sure.
Looking at Highline, how long that's been closed and how long
Yeah.
that's, you don't want to go there.
Yeah, it's closed for all recreation.
Yeah, years. So, well, thanks for the update. What else?
I'd like to just give some acknowledgement to AVSC's program, the Aspen Support Kids program. We had our big giveaway last Saturday at the base of the gondola and out of Buttermilk, and we did 280 skis, boots, and poles, and 150 snowboards to kids in the valley that are on scholarship, which the scholarship funds this year were $350,000. Last year, the data was incredible. Between 701 was the biggest single day for kids to be on the three mountains that have those programs. Over 10,000 contacts basically over the course of the season with those 700 kids. 147 ski pros from the ski schools worked 43 days. And it just, I just focused on Buttermilk, so I don't think about how big this program really is. It's pretty amazing that the logistics work for this thing, because it's just nuts everywhere on Saturdays and Sundays if you haven't watched it before. But we had our first coordinators meeting on Monday following that giveaway. And everybody's pretty psyched up about a good season, and our enrollment's up in the overall program about 300 kids from last year. So it's catching on. Yeah. Seeing a lot more down valley, way down valley athletes coming up. So it's good. So thanks to the ski company and the ski club for putting it out there.
Thanks for that. Anybody else? I'll thank the PD for Faith and Blue Chili Cook-Off. That was a lot of fun. It was right after the game too, over in the high school. So it worked out really well for those who kind of shuttled over there, and a lot of great chili, and it was fun. So appreciate you guys putting that on. I hope you do it again in future years. And with that, we'll move on to manager's report. So Ryan.
Just a couple of quick things, Mayor. As we had presented to you all last weekend was supposed to be the sort of first phase, the demonstration project for the wildfire mitigation up off of Pinion Drive. And unfortunately, the person from AVSC that was helping us, not AVSC, RFOV, that was helping us was sick. So we had to postpone that. So we have new dates of January 11th and or January 25th. So we always aim to try to do this kind of work in the colder months so that we don't risk having the Ips beetle jump to other healthy trees. So this still kind of fits the bill for those winter months, and we'll give you an update once we get closer on that. And then the second quick thing is a feel-good thing. I think Michelle might talk about it a little bit, but I think she asked me to just mention on December 15th as kind of part of what she's going to talk about with our tree lighting stuff. We're going to host a winter market at Takaw. And so I think that'll be a fun opportunity to get people out and about, thinking about shopping for the holidays, and just kind of a neat new thing to try for some of our vendors that are here in the summertime, but doing it in the winter. So that's it, Mayor.
Is anyone doing glue wine for it?
Doing what?
Glue, like the mold wine, the red wine?
Oh, I don't know.
Blue line? Yeah.
Just curious.
It's
All right.
my grandmother's recipe.
Yeah, that's be fun. All right, thanks, Ryan. Next up is item 6A, which is our third quarter 2024 financials. And Doug is that.
Sit over here, talking to the mic. We're ahead of schedule here, so I got a few extra minutes.
We're going to stay.
All right, so this is a same presentation format we've had past quarters. start off with just the graphical illustration of revenue and expense of the general fund. See in the blue left-hand column here is the sales tax revenue, representing 52% of our revenue through 9/30, and that should top out around 60% when we close the books at 12/31. I think we will make our sales tax number this year. I believe that we won't be way over, and I don't think we'll be way under. I think we'll be really close. Next, we have our property tax revenue, 19%. That's pretty much in. And then we have our just other categories of income being our licenses, service charges, and some of our intergovernment revenues. So making up the balance. And looking at our expenses, we have the police and the public works representing 23% each of the total expenditures. So actually close to half of the expenditures to the general fund are related to the police department and the public works area. And that's followed by the administrative area of the town at 15, legislative 18% of the total. That's not normally as high, but we had the construction of the daycare over at Stotts Mill running through the administrative area, so it's a little bit of a just comparable, looking at year over year, just a little bit distorted. And then we have the planning department coming in at 11, pool and rec at 6, and then the electoral and the judicial at less than 1. So that's again just graphically showing our revenue. We go to page 2, James. We could. Where is it, Justin? James, right? James. So we're looking at revenue here. We have just start over here with the taxes, general fund. You'll see that 2023 actual was 6.8 million or 6851. Current year it's 7519, and we're pacing for the year 9,157,000. So we're really, basically 3/4 of the way through the year. So we should be at 75% or so of that number. We're already at 82% of our number. You'll see our property taxes we're already over the number. So when we go through this drill here, I'm really setting up what we'll be talking about next council meeting is the budget amendment for 2024, where we're going to be adjusting some of our budget numbers for 2024 to represent our actuals. This would be like one example. We're already over, so we'll just go ahead and true that number up. Next first reading of the ordinance next week, or next council meeting rather. Next category is license and permits. We were at 242 in 2023. We're at 753 through 930. Favorable to budget of 458. This is really the timing differences of our building permits. This is a tricky number to predict. We're not sure when various developers are going to be pulling permits. And what can still happen, frankly, between now and the end of the year is that BC could pull a permit, and that would generate a pretty good fee. But right now, the numbers aren't contemplating that. So if in fact those things happen, it would just be pulling money out of 25 and pulling it into 2024. Looking at our next category of income, intergovernmental rent, or revenue, excuse me, 390 versus 611, budget of 656. We'll beat this number too. That's essentially our RAFTA grant for the Basalt Connect. We are also able to secure through Chief, not the SRO grant from Roaring Fork School District, just reimbursing the town for the SRO officer. That's at the high school and middle school. Then we have some miscellaneous categories of income here. They're nothing, it's 342 versus 505 to 446 budget. Again, that's exceeding our budgeted number, principally with rec and pool. Followed, just rounding it out here, is other income. Our interest income, we actually have already taken that up once. I don't think we'll take it up again. We're at $1,010,000 versus prior year of 752, and we're pacing 1225. Rates are coming down a bit. So we're seeing I'm seeing a little dip in what we're earning on our, on our excess cash. But we'll make budget. Confident of that. So around.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, of course.
I heard longer-term rates are higher. Do you guys ever shift into that, or is that just not?
Well, we did that in a way. Remember, we moved money and we went with a 4-year ladder approach with some of the excess funds from the restricted fund. And we went basically to a 4-year, we took $5 million and we went 1.250, we went out 4 years. And then another 1,250,000 went out 3, and exactly 2, then 1. So really the idea would be to continue to roll that through. And in effect, you're just basically getting, in effect, the blended, the duration of the portfolio would be like 2 years. You're basically getting a 2-year rate because you're averaging the high and the low. But we're not as dependent on the short-term rates by doing what we did. In fact, last year, we had taken some excess funds from the general fund and invested it the same way. So the idea was to sort of hedge our bet on what rates would do.
Okay.
And then last category is other. We're at, you see that we have just some transfers in from the water fund, and we have sales of fixed assets. We also have here the money that the general fund was moving to the Midland Construction Fund. We had budgeted $1,269,100. We don't need all of that this year because we're going to have some spillage of that cost running into 2025, and I'm estimating that to be about $500,000. So I dialed that back. I didn't move as much from the general fund to the construction fund in 2024, and that $500,000 is a budgeted item for 2025. Yes.
Just before we go to expenditures, if you scroll up to the franchise fee,
Yep.
it's almost double of last year, but then we're still behind. Is that something that we'll get?
It is, because some of those guys pay us monthly, some are quarterly, and some are annually. Holy Cross pays us annually. So that's like a $120,000 check that will come in December or first part of January.
And why did it increase so much? Was that just for construction? And it's like double of last year.
The franchise fees?
Yeah.
I think that 133 was understated. I think at the end of the year, when this normalized out, we were around 350 in revenue.
It just kind of got shifted, paid at a different time.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's a good question, so thank you. All right, so anyways, we're at 10 million, $110,000 of revenue through 9/30 compared to a budget of 11,070. I can look at a few categories here. I know we're already over on property taxes. We're already over on business licenses. We're not needing the full 1,269,000 from the general fund. So I can easily pencil out $1 million of additional revenue that we can take away from the budget. So when we do the budget amendment next council meeting, you'll see a series of adjustments that are just basically increasing the budget for revenue and thereby decreasing the variance. Okay. So in all, it's a good story that we're beating budget by well over $1 million.
It looks pretty healthy.
Yeah. So, and then looking at the expenses, this is the category I mentioned. This is where we're seeing a lot of that daycare expense. We also have in here the COP that hasn't been paid yet. We have all our COPs are due in December so the Tabor refund would be in category legislative here. That gets paid in December 1. Administrative, same way, we have the COP for the police department is in here as well. So there's a fair amount of expenses that are coming through in fourth quarter. But looking at all of our expenses, I can tell you we're about through October 31, which is a pretty good number. We are behind budget. We are actually spending less than budget in the capital arena of about $500,000. So I feel like we're not going to miss our expenditures. I think we're going to be under budget by about say $500,000 easily on capital, and we're going to be over budget on revenue. I think there's a couple departments that are getting close to the budgeted amounts that we may tweak a little bit, but nothing significant. So looking at the various expenses. So at the end of the day, where we're at through 9:30 is that, just page down just a tad there. You'll see the bottom line here is that through 2023, we were at this point in time a year ago, we were a positive fund balance at basic surplus over expenditures of $1,274,000. Right now, we're at $1.6 million, favorable to budget. And we were projected to be, for the year, a use of cash of $1,300,000. So we're beating our budget here by close to $3 million, as it looks right now. Okay, but there's some expenses rolling through here in fourth quarter that will eat into that a bit. Looking at over here to the right-hand corner, this is something new I added. This is just for my own, just gives you a sense of kind of where the cash levels are. That first column is December of all of our funds. We were at basically $34 million. Through September, we were at $34.3 million. So for the first 9 months, the town generated $250,000 of cash. So again, that's going to start going away as I make the bond payments on the debt service, and all the COPs are $1 million, and I also have to continue to pay Stutzman for the construction of Midland. So that will go down, my guess, that will go down probably about $5 million between now and the end of the year. So, but this is a good little barometer here to kind of keeps track of my cash. I can look up at all the various fund balances for the first 9 months. We had a surplus of $1.8 million. I make adjustments to working capital, and it equals the increase in cash. So it's just a way of me checking the numbers.
That's cool.
Any questions on the general fund? That's where most of the activity is. All right, so let's look at restricted funds. This will be quicker now. This really is the same format, graphical illustration of the revenue numbers. This is taxes and REITs that really are making up our number. What's negative is the use of cash that we've taken from the restricted fund to fund Midland. So let's go to the next page. We will. Essentially 3 components of taxes in the restricted fund. It's the post, parks, open space, and trails. The 1/3 of the sales tax we get from the state goes here. We also have a lodging tax and a tobacco tax. So those numbers are tracking our budget. We're at $3,114,000. That was what it was at 2023. We're at $3,115,000, so really spot on to a prior year number. And we're at 80% of the budget number being $3.9 million. So looking at the next category, license and permits, nothing here really stands out that we haven't really talked about. We had a lot of RETA transactions in 2023, not so much in 2024. The real estate market cooled a bit, and we did have a big transaction at the Roaring Fork Club we had $357 of revenue compared to a budget of 10, right? So that was a budget buster to the benefit of us or to the town. And then we're still pacing behind our park dedication fees. I mentioned this as being some wood to chop here to make up the difference between $348 and $600. That's really about the park dedication fees that we'll be pulling from the BC permit when that ultimately comes to fruition. Again, that'll be like a timing difference if it doesn't happen. I'm assuming it doesn't, so I don't have it in actuals. Intergovernment rent, I say rent twice now. Revenue is our employee-based child care credit that we got from the 762 is the employer-based child care credit from the state. That was $800,000 in total. We received this last payment on that in October. We also received money from Pitkin for the benefit of the child care of $450,000 total, and we have received $250 to date. So what's still to come, you'll see a difference there, 1251 to 762, is the Pitkin money be coming in December by their resolution, and we'll also be picking up the 330 from the state that came in October. So we'll make that number as well. So that 1251, if you follow me, I got 762 is the actuals, and the budget's 1251. That gap will narrow, be eliminated once we receive those receipts. So we are at 930. We are at total revenue of 3.6 million. Compared, we're behind where we were last year. That's principally because our RETA revenue was down compared to a budget of 5.4 million. I think we will, it feels like we're going to be making our budget number. Not terribly concerned about that. I think our sales tax number is tracking, tobacco tax is tracking, lodgings tax is tracking, and I know we got that money for those grants coming in. So I don't feel like anything's at risk for not happening. And then looking at the expenses.
Guys, that's a quick question, or an observation. Like, it's interesting how license and permits is relatively close in aggregate overall, right? It's like, big swings and, different directions. Do you ever think of it in terms of like, how's it gonna all shake out? You don't know what individual line items are gonna do, but I mean, it's 70.6 at this point. That's pretty close to where you'd expect it.
Well, yeah, I'll say better lucky and good, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, part of it is the park dedication fees not happening, and then the RETA revenue being down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'd probably, if I was probably doing this over, if this is like my first day and I was gonna say, just start everything over, I'd probably just break this out into like 3 different categories, one being impact fees, and the other one being the RETAs, and then the other was just being the others. Because there's 31 different funds that make up this number.
Yeah.
And it's just trying to, say, boil the ocean, just trying to simplify it in such a way, you can make it more predictable. The RETAs are tough because, you don't know when people are going to sell, you don't know what they're going to sell it for, or when they're going to sell it. I think we've got safeguards in place where we do measure when, we look over year-over-year differences on parcel numbers when they trade, so we have a good sense of what actually is trading in the market. So, don't think there's anything underreporting happening. There's probably more controls we put in place 2025 just to, there's always trust-through verification is the best way, to proceed. But it's a tricky number,
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah. And then the legislative, they just going through the expenses here. The main money going out the door is in our post area, our tobacco tax grants, and then the money we spend on our lodging. And that's the Chamber of Commerce. We take some of our lodging money and we send it for paying for events. And we've also had this cost sharing with Basalt Mountain Inn and the owners of the Element, former owners of the Element, to reimburse them for the capital they made improvements wise when Wills came to fruition, was back in like 93, 10 years ago. I guess it was 2000, I guess it was 13, 14. So anyway, I think at the end of the day, looking at this, we're going to have, you'll see that our actual surplus is pacing 243 compared to a deficit of $1.9 million. We're making up much of the difference there, and the unspent money are in capital items and principally post. So we'll be to the good of 243. Yeah.
Just one quick, on the tobacco tax, is there, on the 360, is that money that goes to the school, or is that not gonna get spent?
Well, it goes to a few places. But the school gets, Roaring Fork School District is getting the majority of it.
Mm-hmm.
It funds the Hope Center. It funds the detox. And it also funds, there's some discretionary grants that go out.
So those just haven't been paid yet for this year? Will we hit that? I guess that's.
There's some unspent.
Paid.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we do have some of that unspent money from what the high school didn't use.
Right, for the
on the
press
bus
box, remember?
Okay.
They were going to do something for the,
Yep.
so there's unspent money there.
Okay.
So I think that's just going to accumulate.
Oh, it's great. I mean, it's awesome that we can.
Yep, yep.
Use
So I
it.
got you, to answer your question. Right. I got
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Thank you. Sorry.
Sure. So anyway, we're going to be feeling we're in pretty good shape there. We started the year with about $8.6 million of restricted funds, And if this comes to all to fruition, we add another 250 to the coffers, we'll be just under $9 million of restricted funds. You know, I'm looking at our general funds. We started the year with about 11.3 million of reserves, and I think we're going to have $1 million surplus at the end of the year. So I think we'll have another, you know, collectively, we're going to be adding about $1 million, $2 million, $3 to our reserves. And then I think that I can prove that out with the cash projections that I've got. So I feel pretty comfortable with those numbers. So all in all, pretty good report. So then looking at the last page, I got a few more minutes here. These are all our potpourri funds, I call them. Bond fund, it's just money in, money out. This is pay for our debt service, our taxable and tax exempt funds. Capital construction fund, this is the Midland work, our green projects, and our affordable housing. See, like to date, we've spent $1,159,000 is our use of funds. This is against our actual revenue of just 2985 was our revenue in the construction fund. We spent $4 million. At 9:30, we still probably had about $4.2 million to pay Stutzman alone. And I don't believe we're going to hold back 500 from the general fund to pay the contingency. I think that's probably or the retainage of the project. So I think we're going to probably be at another, I don't know, feels like another $4 million or so on the high side between now and the end of the year. And then in the water fund, pretty unremarkable. We have 977 revenue for the third quarter against expenses of 683. So to date, we're at 293 to the good compared to a budget of 424. Again, nothing way off here. I think one of the things that will come once that BC permit comes is that we'll get some tap fees. And we'll also get some surcharges for that water tank on the south side. So I think that will all help make the revenue numbers. I feel like we're in really good shape through 9:30 is basically the headline. And when we do this amendment, I'll be principally taking expenses down and revenue up, which is, you know, better than the other way around. I think some amendments don't always work out that way. They're asking for more, I'm giving money back. So that's what I got.
Cool, thanks.
Any questions?
Nothing for me.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments from, based on Ryan and your comment too, David. I think Northwest Cog, the communities in the resort region of Northwest Cog are kind of taking a deep dive into their resources and funding and trying to differentiate between a resident economy and a tourist economy. And, you mentioned the 31 restricted funds, some of which have been around, I don't know, 25, 30 years, especially the Rita's golf course and Willits. And I'd really be interested in maybe after the first of the year, taking a little deeper dive into those restricted funds to see if the language on some of them is still addressing the current needs of the community. They're shifting significantly from 10 years ago. We have 5 affordable housing projects in the pipeline, which is, since I've been around, a record number of projects that reflect what the community's asking for. I just think that it would behoove us to take a look at, and I know some of those are dependent on the citizens voting for a change in like post, for example, but others, I read through a few of them, and the language for some of them seems a little bit outdated, and the percentages of where the funds go also seem like they could be changed a little bit. So it might be something to look at, going forward to see if there's, we've heard a lot from the schools about funding some of the issues they're seeing, and David and I had lunch the other day and talked about the drop in enrollment and then the fact that we're having local children leave the school district and go other places. So I think there's some things that are popping up that maybe would stimulate us a conversation about that. Just trying to stay ahead of the curve a little bit. So if
Well,
that's,
I think much of the reserves, there are like 31. I think much of the numbers, 80% of that number is going to be in post, tobacco, lodging, and then all the REITs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the impact funds, there's like 3 funds for the police department. There's like one for the community gardens. There's smaller ones
Mm-hmm.
that it's just numbers moving around with not a lot of significance to what you're talking about. I think it's the
Right.
REITs, but it's also handy having that REIT money there when you're wanting to buy, 6 units over here at BC when it comes on the market. Have some dry powder you can actually be strategic with. So it is, and actually still being used for what it was intended for, affordable housing.
I think that's exactly what we're trying to confirm and
Right.
look at.
Happy to go through that.
Yeah. So
Take
maybe,
direction from Ryan on what the next step will
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind too that the REITs don't have flexibility. The council doesn't have the ability to modify the language in the REIT, so that's locked in. And, I think the REITs give us, it really makes the difference for us to fund capital in, improvements in the town. It is that dry powder that Doug talks about. And so, there is flexibility in it. They all differ a little bit, but they really have kind of followed the arc of, I think what the changes in the town has been, which is sort of what you were saying, and they do go, some of the more recent ones, toward paying affordable housing, towards green projects, towards transportation solutions. And so I think we have some of that built in. As it relates to the impact fees that go towards childcare or specific areas like the, Willets Lane, those things don't go away as far as, demand and our responsibility to maintain infrastructure in some of those areas. So I think we can certainly, bring that out and we can talk about it as a group. But I would say, we utilize a lot of those funds. The post funds, for example, if we don't have those funds, a lot of the projects we're doing don't get done, and more importantly, they don't get maintained. And so I think that's, been a big part of what we've been able to do. If we were just dependent on the general fund, this town would look a lot different. And we just wouldn't be able to keep up with the service demand, I don't believe.
Yeah, we, initially, the post only had dedicated 10% of the total revenues to maintenance, and then I think we went back to the citizens and asked for 20.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder given what we've done and what we are doing, if 20 is enough to maintain. So, those
Bumping up
require a
against
vote.
it.
Yeah, and I don't know about the RETA, maybe Jeff could answer that. If that's buried in a land use approval document or an annexation agreement, that most of them probably are annexations that got REITs attached to them, especially Willets and the Roaring Fork Club.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that's an annexation agreement, if there's a side road to,
Yeah, I mean,
different path.
I think there would be a condition as part of any of the annexation agreements or the land use approvals that created the RETA, that required it as a condition of approval, and that the developer applicant voluntarily is entering into this RETA agreement and submitting the property to it. As for amendment, I can take a look at what the amendment provisions would be, if we're looking at a change in some of the uses, but it's not something the town could do unilaterally. I think it would,
No, I would, yeah.
at a minimum, require the developer applicant or their successors in interest, probably the property owners that are subject to the RETA, to approve any change of use. And it gets a little complicated when, there's dozens of units or lots that are subject to it. So,
Well, it may not
but
be,
I can take a look at that
it
as,
may not be a question of use, but it might be a question of distribution within that RETA. So if it goes to housing, arts and culture, and, some other impact.
yeah.
I'm not suggesting that, the whole thing changed, but the way the funds are distributed, maybe. But anyway, we
Within
can
different
talk
purposes.
about it sometime, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think the first question is there free cash in any of that? And in my understanding, is there not like a lot of wiggle room in the sense that, like, it's all being used for something. There's an opportunity cost if we were to use it for something else. So I think that has to be factored in, like, what is available and then what would those opportunity costs be? And obviously, there's some things that we can't, do without in the sense from a maintenance standpoint, so I'm curious how much of it would be more flexible, even if we were able to do something. And my guess is it's not as much necessarily as we'd think, but I don't know. We'd have to kind of do an analysis of
It's a
that.
trending thing, these other communities are struggling with the same questions, same issues, so.
Yeah. Well, sure, I mean, as this discussion evolves, I'll be happy to look at that issue. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's good points.
I think Hannah has her hand up.
Hannah, do you have your hand up, or
No,
that's a cursor?
Just a cursor. Sorry, Hannah.
I'm all set, thanks.
Okay, you guys good?
Yeah, we're good, thanks.
Ryan, why no?
The good comments, those. Can look into that next year. Okay, next item up is going into council actions. We got item 7A, public hearing and second reading, ordinance number 21, series of 2024, an ordinance of the town council of the town of Basalt, Colorado, granting special review, site plan review, mixed-use parking reduction, and community housing review for a mixed-use building on Lot 1A, Willits Lane Town Center subdivision PUD, Basalt, Colorado. And that is James, who has this one.
Yeah, thank you. We do have the applicants here this evening. We've got Jeff Orsolak representing the applicant group. He can introduce the rest of his team. Yeah, if you guys want to.
Leave me up here alone.
But this is a public hearing and second reading of an ordinance on an application submitted by Sophie Co. LLC. And it's for a PUD amendment, special review, site plan review, community housing review, and mixed-use parking reduction. Excuse me. To construct a mixed-use building consisting of commercial office space of up to 3,800 square feet and 23 residential units on Lot 1A of the Willits Lane Town Center subdivision and PUD. The subject property, as was discussed at the last meeting, is the vacant property adjacent to the Bank of Colorado. It's zoned C3 PUD and is in the urban growth boundary. It's part of the two-lot subdivision that was known as the Willits Lane Town Center subdivision. As was discussed at the last meeting, the applicant had approvals on the property dating back to 1996 to do a fully commercial building on the site. And they actually had building permits, but never built the fully commercial building. So now they're requesting the necessary land use actions for a mixed-use building. And as I noted, it's for commercial space of 3,800 square foot. And then also 23 residential units. They proposed for 3 of those residential units to be on the first floor, and then the remainder of the residential units to be on the second and third floors. The proposal includes 5 deed-restricted Category 1 units that are part of the total of 23 units. As was discussed at the last meeting, staff had identified a series of discussion items that were in the prior packet materials. These were reviewed with the Planning and Zoning Commission as part of their review, and there was analysis provided for P&Z. At the last meeting, the council approved the ordinance on first reading, but had an addition of a condition related to bike share, which has been included in the ordinance. And council at the last meeting earmarked the topics of the number of deed-restricted units with an occupancy priority for on-site employees, the East Valley Road crosswalk in the pedestrian refuge island, the traffic discussion, as well as vested rights for further consideration at this meeting. And so on those topics, regarding the number of units that would be earmarked for an occupancy priority for on-site employees, the Basalt Affordable Community Housing Commission, BAC, recommended that one of the units have an occupancy priority for on-site employees. The applicants had proposed for all 5 of the deed-restricted units to have an occupancy priority for on-site employees. Council could allow for all 5 units to have that occupancy priority if you felt it was appropriate by amending the ordinance. Staff is not concerned about limiting those occupancy priority units, and so would be accepting of the 5 units. Of the other topics, the East Valley Road crosswalk with the pedestrian refuge island. Once again, there were 2 options for the crosswalk. One that was closer to the intersection going across East Valley Road that did not have the pedestrian refuge island. And then there was another scenario where the crosswalk had to be moved away from the intersection, but then could have the pedestrian refuge island. The crosswalk in the scenario where it had to be moved away from the intersection with the refuge island was moved 3 feet to the valley side. In reviewing the refuge island scenario, the town engineer provided a letter that you have at your seats. She is recommending doing the crosswalk without the refuge island because she was concerned that moving the crosswalk away from the intersection coming out of City Market would potentially have cars accelerating out of the City Market parking lot going up Valley, and if you move the crosswalk away from the intersection, she was concerned that you might have more conflicts. And unfortunately, she could not be here this evening, but she provided the letter that you have instead. Related to the other topics that we had talked about, as far as traffic is concerned, the applicants have their traffic engineer here this evening. And as part of the applicant comments, they can talk about traffic scenario that came up last time. In terms of vested rights, as was discussed at the last meeting, the applicants did request 5 years of vested rights. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended the town code requirement of 3 years of vested rights with an extension potential. And since the last meeting, the applicants have proposed another scenario, which would be 3 years of vested rights with a provision that would be an automatic extension of 1 year for each quarter that the national economy would be in recession during the vested rights period. So that could increase if the national economy went into recession. So staff has provided a condition that requires the 3 years of vested rights with a potential for extension, but then 2 alternative conditions representing the applicant's proposals that council could consider in the ordinance. And so generally, staff would be happy to answer questions that council might have on any of the provisions or the discussion items that we had at the last meeting, but we've earmarked these topics for discussion. Staff would also like to note a suggested change to one of the conditions, condition number 19. You've got this condition alternative at your seat. But basically, this change to the condition would allow for the condominiumization to be approved as part of this ordinance, and then the map and declaration of covenants would then be reviewed by the town planner and town attorney. Staff is comfortable with this adjusted condition that you have at your seat. So the P&Z reviewed the application and recommended approval with conditions. This evening, staff would suggest taking comments from the applicant, taking public comments because it is a public hearing, and then providing council discussion on these topics. If you're comfortable, you could approve the ordinance on second reading. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to the applicants for comments.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it. And thanks again for having us, guys. We're coming up on 30 years or whatever on this one. So we're excited to kind of keep moving it forward. I've got Yancey Nichols, who's been our civil engineer since the beginning, and Ben Firestein with Kimberly Horn, who's representing the traffic, the team that did the traffic review of the traffic study that you have, so he can to answer any questions you have. So just want to kind of talk about those two items that James touched on, vesting and our kind of request to, we had asked for kind of that longer 5-year time, and one of the reasons we did that is it really, it's been really hard for us to keep these projects moving, especially as we know each week it seems things are less certain in this world as they were a week before. So, we understand your concern about not having too long vesting periods, and so we thought hopefully we can kind of come to kind of a middle ground where we can kind of address our concerns about, the ups and downs of the economy, and if, we kind of are stuck in a position, which is what happened the last time the vesting ended on this property, which was 2008, we couldn't do anything. Nobody would fund us, nobody would finance us, we couldn't build it, and the vesting ended then. So that's why, part of the reasons why we're back to you now. So that's kind of why we're saying, well, let's see if we can kind of have a middle ground where we have a little bit of wiggle room if things are going in the wrong direction outside of all of our control. So that's the vesting. And then back to deed restriction, I think, we would really like this opportunity to kind of try this as a new approach where we can really provide housing for people and businesses on site for their business, for their owner, or for their employees. We think it'll reduce impacts for this site on sites around it, impacts on the community if you're living where you're working. The master plan discusses this as one of the goals, and so we think, well, let's try it. Let's make this opportunity so that we can provide housing for people that are working in town, and people specifically that are working on the site. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben to talk, and Nancy to talk a little bit about the traffic study to answer some of those questions I think you guys had last time, and then we'll just answer any questions you guys may have. So thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, hi. I'm here representing Curtis Rowe, the author of the traffic compliance letter that was provided to you all. In conclusion, we reviewed the 2015 traffic impact study and reviewed the original vesting of the 13,000 square foot office space against this new land use mix that's being proposed to you all. In conclusion, the proposed project generates less peak hour trips as compared to the originally proposed office space. And the project is in traffic compliance. I think that's further edified by CDOT not requiring an additional access permit. Our firm does not believe that an additional traffic analysis is required at this time, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions that you may have.
Do you guys have any questions now? We can specific the traffic before we go to public hearing. Okay, let's, Yancey, are you going to go? Do you have any comments?
Not necessarily. If you want to go dive in more of the history of the traffic and some of the approvals, I go back to that decade or two. I'd be glad to answer those questions.
Okay. Well, let's do public hearing then if no one has any kind of clarifying questions. So I will open the public hearing. If anyone would like to speak, please come up. All the same rules apply, 3 minutes. And make sure also you sign in the back of the room if you are going to come up and speak. Don't see anybody standing up at this point, and I don't see anyone online. Is there anybody I can't see in the
No, we're
tab?
in the attendees
Okay.
section. And
All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing, and we'll open up the questions and comments. I think we do need to hit the traffic, crosswalk, refuge island, occupancy requirements for deed restricted and vested rights. I know those were 4 topics that were kind of placeholdered for this week. So let's bring up traffic again. Does anybody have any further comments or questions about traffic they want to discuss here?
If I remember right, I think the question was, like, how is this development relative to that Crown Mountain entrance in the traffic study? Did it reach out that far? Did it have that kind of reach?
So the existing master plan or traffic impact study that was done in 2015 did not review the intersection eligibility and Valley Road. The focus of that traffic study, which is inclusive of this parcel, was the primary Willits development area. Any traffic heading north of that area would immediately see its impact in the traffic circle, and Highway 82 intersection, and traffic heading south would be captured by the original road, Highway 82 intersection. That was the focus of that study. It provided the data heading northbound above the traffic circle, but did not specifically review the intersection, which happens to be in Eagle County as well, within that study.
And nor does this one, right?
Or does, our letter
Yeah.
simply reviews the proposed use on parcel 1A versus the new land use mix that's being proposed here.
Okay, thanks.
And I might add to that, you know, typically, if this project that's proposed before you today increased traffic, then typically we would look to see it impact on something, but when it reduces traffic from what it was anticipated, clear back is in the original infrastructure it was designed. You gotta remember, this was part of the whole Willits Lane realigning for that intersection for Eagle County, as part of this parcel being created. So it doesn't make, from our standpoint, make sense to go look at the Elgin-Bell intersection now, since it was already anticipated and we're reducing traffic from the original study. I mean, where do you stop? Because you could just keep going down the...
Extrapolate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I don't have any other questions on traffic, so we can move on to the crosswalk refuge island. I know that the memo that, when we're around here, that Catherine wrote, I thought was really clear, and I'm supportive of just the crosswalk and not putting the island away from the intersection. The safety concern for me weighs a lot. So I'm curious what other counselors think and questions or comments on that.
Is it gonna have lights, like the push button, big signs?
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. Maybe one in the middle too would probably be helpful, like split it, you know.
On
If
the
you put-
median?
Yeah, if you put one right in that lane, it's not really the traffic island, but it also will, I mean, I think in that letter, people turning right out of City Market, it would just help them see. Right, so you have 1, 2, 3, instead of just 2.
Could you do
There's 2 now. You said 3, I'm sorry, I lost.
Yeah, could you put one in the middle of the, like?
that little concrete
Oh, Ian's.
medium? Is that possible?
I
not to
mean,
make
it
your
could be
life harder.
analyzed, if it made sense. I'm not sure with that kind of distance, if it would make sense to have another push button that flashed.
Or even if you had just like the Ballard, a light up Ballard in there, or something, just something to draw eyes to that. I mean, people just rush
Well,
in and out of there like crazy.
I think if it was analyzed and it made sense, we could do that.
Okay.
Public Works might not like it for snow plowing and some other things, et cetera, and if it gets hit, what's the maintenance on that? But those things could be considered.
Okay.
Yeah, we have no problem with that.
Refuge island versus crosswalk at intersection?
I took a ride through there a couple times, and this makes more sense what Catherine's suggesting. The question I have though is on the south side of the roundabout where you connect to Willits, there's a crosswalk that follows the radius of the roundabout. Is there anything on the north side of that that would accommodate that kind of thing, or, you know what I mean, Yes. If you're heading into Soper's Village, coming out of City Market heading into Cypress Village, there's a crosswalk that's on the radius of that roundabout.
Right?
It takes people across to the apartments that are on the corner. There's nothing like that on the rest of the roundabout. Is that correct?
That's correct, because,
Other side.
yeah, we did that purposely in CDOT. We didn't want to try to get pedestrians to the Highway 82. We wanted them to cross and be on that side and not on the 82 side.
So there's not a sidewalk here that, on the north side, that leads to the roundabout. And so the idea behind having the crosswalk here is to get them all on a new sidewalk to connect up to.
Okay, so there's no plan for any further,
No, and that was really planned purposely to not have no sidewalk on that side.
That makes sense.
Yeah, just, we don't want any pedestrians in that intersection.
so you're trying to keep them on the fringe of that,
Correct.
okay. That was,
And that was another driving force for the underpass of 82, you know.
good.
If we were to do, for the motion, we just have an alternate condition then for, to follow the recommendation in the memorandum. Is that how that would work?
Yeah, you'd want to substitute out the refuge island.
Okay. Sounds good. Anything else on that one? But we have a, yeah, well, I think we have a consensus on crosswalk. Prefer the cross? Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with Catherine's suggestion.
Okay, cool. Occupancy requirements for the deed restricted units for on-site employees. I mean, I think one unit is not even like required. That's an experiment in and of itself. And I'm not comfortable putting 5 for the business there. I'd rather stick with the 1 at most. But I'm open to what others think.
Is it proposed as?
Yeah,
I thought it was proposed as
Yeah, the
5.
developers want 5. I just want to respond to what they're asking, and in the ordinance, it's 1, I believe.
Oh, okay.
You know, give you a little light of like how we're thinking about this a little bit. So, you know, this is about 3,800 square feet of ground floor space. And we think that what we're hearing is like what local businesses need are small spaces, not big spaces.
Yeah.
So the idea is that, you know, we're kind of exploring this idea of, oh, if we can chunk this up a little bit, and then with each one of those, you know, that you can get a unit as well. We think that's an opportunity for that local business that says, okay, maybe I have a construction firm and you want to put my employee in here that's working in the space and have an office in that space. And that's how we're thinking about it, is that you can kind of parse these up into smaller, because we hear like that 700 to 1,000 square foot space is like the space that's
The sweet
not
spot.
out there for
Yeah.
the locals now. You know, it's like you can get the big space if you want. You know, you want a kitchen garage, they got it, but, you know, not something at this scale. So that's kind of how we were looking at it.
And maybe just to explain Bach's recommendation of the 1 unit, because the project is a mixed-use project, the mitigation requirements for the commercial are forgiven because they're lower than the mitigation requirements for the residential. However, the commercial would have required 1 unit of mitigation. So Bach used that justification for requiring
I see.
one of the units to have the occupancy priority for the on-site commercial.
So the 1 unit's tied kind of to the formula, so to speak, for the commercial space below. The rest is tied to the residential free market.
Correct.
Okay. Makes sense to me.
I do think that makes sense, and I struggle with the 5 only because to me that's 5 units that then are tied to that person's employment, which I think is something that we've, as a council, expressed concern with in other applications and hesitancy to get on board with tying somebody's housing to their employment. So I understand and, you know, like the idea, if it's 5 local businesses, they each get 1 to give to an employee, but then that employee loses their job, they also lose their housing. And that's kind of a tough pill to swallow. Whereas if it's just 4 more open, affordable housing units, it's not necessarily tied to their housing
Well said.
or employment, sorry.
We understood.
Yeah.
I mean, I would let them do 2, but.
Yeah, I would be on board with more
Like, I
of a
think the
compromise,
idea
but
is
like,
great, but I think it goes back to what
Yeah.
Angel said and what we've seen at other developments, and it takes it out of the pool for other affordability. I get where you guys want it, it makes your,
Yeah, it makes it.
makes the commercial
product.
space that much more valuable.
easier to get tenants. I get it, right? But,
Well, and
but
also
I
it's-
am with
we're
Ryan
hearing
there.
what
Like, I would
business owners
be
need.
willing
So-
to compromise more and do 2 and not just 1, personally. But I'd probably cap it at 2.
I would stick with the 1. That's what Bach said, and the logic, it's very clean logically for me, so.
Well, I feel differently. I hear from local businesses all the time that the biggest challenge is employees. And whether you lose your job or not, kind of depends on whether the business goes out of business or stays in business. And so 2 to 5, really what's the, overall, it doesn't have that great of an impact to either someone being tied to their unit or a business having a unit to provide an employee with. So it's kind of a chicken egg thing. But I think the overwhelming sentiment in the business community is to maintain a small business and the character of the community here, and Willits is a great example, that most of those businesses are locally owned, those small ones. And, the rents where these people are living that work in those businesses are doubling. And I could think of one right across the street here that their rent went from $1,200 a month to $2,400 a month for the 2 employees that they had. So they didn't necessarily lose their job because they lost their job, they lost their job because they lost their housing. So it's really a catch-22. So I don't have any preference for 2 or 5, but that's the messaging I'm getting from people that I know.
Yeah, I agree with Rick. I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other in this instance here. So, yeah, I think 2 is pretty small. I get what you're trying to do. 2 is pretty small. Do they have to be tied at all, or that's what you're into? It like, what happens if the employee doesn't want the housing? Then they rent it to.
Here's down to the next. So, yeah, I think example of that might be over in Block 9, the Ski Coast one. I think there might be one of those units didn't get filled by a teacher, right, or and so then they tiered down to the next tier. And so, if you're looking at a mix, there is something nice about the 3 on the ground floor being tied to the 3 units on the ground floor. So then you also you have good adjacencies there as well. So it's maybe another way to think about it if 5's too big of a pill to swallow. But
Yeah, basically related to the occupancy priorities, if you set the occupancy priority for the on-site commercial space and then they didn't have an employee that was interested in, occupying the unit or renting the unit, then it would basically go down the town's waterfall of occupancy priorities. So it would then fall to essential employees within the town, and then it would fall to regular employees within the town, and then it would broaden out geographically between Aspen and Glenwood if it continued to not find an employee.
But if we pass 19 and it's condominiumized and they sell it, then it's still owned by an individual that gets to rent it to either their employee or someone that fits that category.
Yeah, but it would still waterfall.
It would still waterfall, they would have to follow the waterfall.
Yes.
Okay.
In that scenario, the reality is that a business would probably buy it and sell it or rent it to their employee. I mean, I think either way, you're accomplishing the mission, just having the housing. What concerns me, and I know this is it's 6 1/2 dozen in this micro situation, but over-rotating towards tying people too much to, with their housing to their employment disincentivizes labor mobility to me. I mean, people don't move from their houses because of low interest rates. I mean, there's things that disincentivize moving and changing jobs, and I think the more we can not do that, the better. That's where I'm coming from. But I know Hannah and Angela haven't spoken. I don't know if they have anything to say, but
I mean, I see both sides, really. I go back and forth. I feel like everyone's housing is tied to their employment in some way, unless you're just independently wealthy. You know, you might not live and work, you know, under the same umbrella, but it's all tied together. But, you know, I do appreciate the argument about limiting people's mobility. I just kind of wonder, honestly, what that would look like in, you know, 20 years. You've got these commercial spaces, and I don't know. It seems like an experiment that I don't personally feel that invested in. I think one is fine.
It's really not that different from the way we're doing it now with the waterfall, and prioritizing who gets to live where, in what size unit, and what category. And it's all similar, because if someone is in a town of Basalt housing unit and gets hired by Picking County or a private sector company, they are going to have to leave. I mean, knowing that going in the door it's like buyer beware or renter beware. Here's the conditions under which you're employed. And so, you know, the thing that I look back at is that you don't know what it's going to look like in 20 years. And the people that we're trying to bring into the community and the businesses we're trying to support, we're recruiting them to come to our geographical region and support our businesses. We're not saying we're guaranteeing you a place to live, but here's an opportunity. And depending on your attitude about upward mobility, you may end up moving into a single-family home 20 years from now and having a children and family and the whole 9 yards. You know, on the other hand, we're losing this out-migration issue of mid-level people that are making $150K at a household. They're going back home. You know, so it's a real push and pull deal. And I'm more on the side of opportunity. If businesses can come in here and survive and grow their business and support their business till they can get past the incubator stage, that solidifies our economy without having to depend on outside cash coming in. We're generating our own economic system.
You know, Rick, I just want to say like an interesting perspective. We have, you know, the way that you described it, we haven't seen this model to, you know, I don't believe here in town, just where, you know, you could be a small business and have an opportunity to own a unit that's above it. A lot of the units that are tied to businesses are large businesses that have the money and the resources to be able to buy up large amounts of units. And so, you know, if this is sort of like an incubator size of a business or a small business, it might allow them to get into the market and kind of, you know, I think grow those homegrown or you know, local businesses like we want down there. So I think that's just another way to look at it, because I think a lot of the just what we hear here is a lot of, you know, small businesses. There's not an opportunity like that. So they've got to go try to, you know, leave their employees to, you know, open on the free market, and, you know, good luck finding something, but we hope you come back and work for us. This kind of gives them that opportunity to get something in on the ground floor. So just something to think about there.
Hannah, I saw you go off mute a couple minutes ago.
Yeah, I was going to say something really similar to Ryan, that I like the idea that it can kind of lower the barrier, democratize smaller businesses getting a unit. I don't know that we need all 5 to be dedicated, and the reason I say that is because I'm balancing you know, the need for those businesses and then traffic, and it's a really transit connected area. So I love the idea of reducing traffic by putting people near to where they work. But it's such a great location that those employees could get other places easily without a car.
Thanks for that. All right, well, we can move on to, unless anybody has anything else on that topic. We'll probably suss that out in the motion process. But vested rights, 3 years, 5 years, I'm not gonna lead off on this one.
I'll lead off, just 3 years. I mean, you start tying it to recessions, it's just gonna create this whole, other people will be doing it. Just 3 years, you can come back again, it's approved. I just don't wanna keep changing this per development, just like, let's as a town, just stick to something and keep doing it and not modify it every single time.
I agree about that. I really don't want to open the can of worms about tying it to a recession, because that could just go on and on. And again, I appreciate the time that they spent on the recommendation, and I think 3 years, and in the time that I've been here, I haven't seen anybody come back and ask for an extension and not get it. So I feel like 3 years is fair.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with those sentiments. I think, if we wanted to change it, that's not the forum to change it. There's another avenue to actually take a look at it and change it itself, but per instance doesn't seem like the appropriate spot.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's an interesting idea with the economy, the recessions. And I think to Angela's point, this council and past councils have been pretty amenable to extensions, but they're based on circumstances of the applicant, of the project, of the economy, not the economy in isolation. You know what I mean? That doesn't really work out for me.
We've been here before. That's kind of, what our concern is. We've one of the things that we're seeing now is things are just taking longer, right? Everything takes longer. Getting our consultants to do the drawings takes longer. Getting a permit takes longer. All these things. So this may not be the forum for you guys, like you said, but I think as you guys go forward, you might want to really consider looking hard at it, because if you start to if we start to track back 3 years from now, we know that it's 5 to 6 months for our permit. That's a good percentage of that time is I have to have it in for permit before I can even, and it have to be done with that before I can even, and my vesting could be over in the middle of the permit review. So, and things are, we have more complicated rules than we used to have. And so the 3 has been around for a while, and maybe consider, as you guys are looking at this next time through the process, when you're doing your code, take a look at that. There's just a lot more complexities that we all are involved with, and that's what helps make sure the community is the way we want it to be, is to have those complexities, but they do all take time. And so 3 years ain't what it used to be, as one would say. It's very short as we start to look at it, and it becomes really difficult for our standpoint to get the finance and get it all in place and make it all happen in that period of time.
Yeah, I understand. That's something we can look into.
Yeah.
Well, I think at this point, I don't know if there's any other topics or any questions people want to delve into here. Otherwise, start figuring out a motion. And then I think we're in the ballpark on the deed restricted parts. I'm confident we'll figure something out, but
Can you put a range in there of 2 to 5?
What do you mean?
Depending on the success they may have as finding small business operators.
Well, we set the middle of 3.
Yeah, it'd be better, I think, to pick a number than do anything conditional.
You guys want 5, I want 2. Let's meet in the middle at 3. And then everyone's happy, and
This isn't a hill I'm going to die on, so.
yeah, I know.
Well, I'll roll
You're
with
not gonna
it.
fight for 1.
Yeah.
We already outnumbered, so it's.
And then, Council, one other item, there was an alternative condition for condition 19 on condominiumization, which would basically take it from an administrative review process instead of a town council review process. And that's if the only thing is to condominiumize it, there wouldn't be a change in any other restriction on the property. And just as a point of clarification, the way the deed restrictions are set up on here is that it applies to both rental and ownership. So in the event the buildings were condominiumized, the deed restrictions would not need to be reformed because it's already contemplated on as part of this ordinance.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And so if we went with the original language, I mean, just for everybody's edification, the condominiumize, like what are the requirements? Just condominiumizing. I think it's allowed under statute and under our code, right? But what do they have to do?
Procedurally, you'd have to come for approval and ultimately come through town council. But basically, if that's the only action that is occurring, which is really trying to change the form of the ownership of the building, you can't impose any restrictions on that form of the ownership that you wouldn't do or also do on the same physical product, but in a different form of ownership. In other words, you couldn't place new restrictions on it if the only thing changing is that it's going from rental to ownership units. If there's other things that are part of the land use approval that are changing, it opens the door to that. But that's,
Yeah, we just didn't want to have to bother you.
Yeah.
They're basically like preempting the stuff that happened at BCC.
well,
Everywhere.
BCC was
For more
different.
changes, though.
BCC was different
I'll be
because
gone in
there was
2
other
years,
stuff, there's other stuff wrapped up into that decision. I think what they're
Okay,
proposing
we'll
here
leave
is a
that to you.
very, very straightforward in that it would be, the condition would only allow for that in the event the only request was condominiumization. If there's another amendment to the land use approval, it would still have to come to town council the same way that BCC and the same way another project recently did, so.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, why as a developer, wouldn't you just come to us and say, hey, we just want to build this building condominiumized? I guess that's what this amendment is.
Yeah, we're just,
or
like I
is
said,
it-
we were just trying to, there didn't seem to, if there, like Jeff said, if there was there's no changes happening, it's just whether it's condominiumized or not. We didn't think there was a reason to bother you guys about it. We thought it's okay, your land use is still the same. We're talking about either renting these or selling them as we get into bringing this thing up vertically and what the market is looking for. And that's when we're gonna make the decision whether we do A or B.
And that just gives you more flexibility.
It doesn't give us more flexibility, it just doesn't waste your time. That was kind of our thinking, is more than anything. We're not changing anything, so, you know, if we were coming back to say, hey, well, we'd like to have these 5 units all, you know, wherever we end up, we want to change that conversation again, then we definitely have to come back to you. But this is just whether it's a for sale or for rent thing, and it allows us to say, put the deed restricted on each unit that we're putting a deed restricted on. So that's it. I'm not saying anything that's right, Jeff?
No, I think that's.
We're just trying to simplify.
It's basically having the council discussion on the condo now rather than
3 years from now.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder why developers come with non-condominiumized buildings, and then obviously stuff changes, I totally get that, but why wouldn't you just come in with the language of having a condominiumized building, and then that gives you the flexibility to do either you owned the whole thing and rent it, or you could sell it?
Well, it's a rent or sale, and so I think if it's a rental building, this is a little outside my depth, but as I understand it, it's a little bit easier if it's a single kind of building. If it's a for sale, you need to split it up. So that's the difference, right? So if we don't know if we're doing for rent or for sale, being able to come and take care of that at a later date is why that's in there. Does that make sense or no?
It's, yeah, we're just going around.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add, I think this is not to speak for this applicant.
Not in a bad way.
Not to speak for this applicant or any other applicant, but I think there was a historic practice of getting approval for apartment buildings and then later condominiumizing them after the period for construction defect claims had expired and had run. And then you come back and condominiumize a project. I know that's a developer practice as well. Here we're talking about it, that's not the exact case, but you're kind of asking why does it happen at different timing? That's another reason. Yeah.
I have one more question about the units that are tied to the commercial space. So in the event that the building is condominiumized, what happens to those units?
They're just separated out legally as a separate unit, but they would still have the deed restriction that's tied to them and the owner that's tied to them. So whatever, it allows you to keep that deed restriction on that unit. You don't lose that.
Okay.
But in
Regardless.
the rental situation, you would own those, but they would have a prioritization from the business. But then if they were condominiumized, then you'd still own them.
Right.
And then
Or if
you'd
the
have
building is
to-
condominiumized and I sell, a small business may want to own their space, not rent from us.
Yeah,
So that might be where we're going.
and you may sell
Yeah.
both,
They
the
would
commercial
sell
and
the
the other
commercial,
space.
they would buy the commercial and the residential.
Yeah,
I have a question. Let's say you put 5 businesses in the 3,800 square feet, right? Split it up into small spaces like you're saying you're being asked for. And then we, just to pick a number, agree on 3 units. Who gets priority on those? Out of those 5 businesses and 3 units, or 1 unit or 2 units? Do you buy from the business perspective?
Yeah,
Is it
no, I
first come,
understand.
first serve, and then if they lose it, does it go through a waterfall of?
If they don't use
Can
it.
one business rent all 3 of them, or?
We hadn't dug into it that deeply, quite frankly.
That's a good question.
It somewhat affects my
I think-
decision on like
Well,
one
that's
versus.
the thing. we're creating
I
more
know.
bureaucracy
What?
in a way of.
I think 1 is enough.
Eventually, we're gonna have a staff person that is only gonna be doing waterfall all the time.
Yeah, I think the question maybe for James can answer is if you have a greater number of people seeking the available unit, what's the process for selection of who gets it?
Yeah.
I think from an administrative perspective, if you had 5 businesses and you had 3 units that had the on-site occupancy priority, as long as, the businesses had people that were interested, it would really be the developer's choice of which of the 5 businesses got.
Yeah, first come, first
That's the
science
3
first.
on-site
It's America, baby.
I mean, I think, without specific language in there, that's how staff would look at it.
Well, on the topic of the condominiumization, any other questions or comments on that? We're getting late on time, but. Anybody have an opinion?
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm understanding it from Jeff is that it's very simple and it only applies to a simple switch where everything else stands, and I'm fine with that. It's, as markets change, as the economy changes, you might decide you want to condominiumize it, and yeah, as long as nothing else changes, then.
Right.
That seems logical to me. I mean, just like BCC, even in principle, I didn't have an issue with condominiumization of that, and I wouldn't in this situation either. So I'd be supportive of alternative condition 19 also.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt ordinance number 21, series of 2024 on second reading with 3 years of vested rights. The alternative condition on number 19, a limit of 3 units dedicated to on-site employees, and the crosswalk that was recommended in the memorandum with the possibility of adding an extra light for safety, if possible.
We'll look into it, yeah.
Second.
It's a good motion.
That was tidy. That was
Yeah.
tidy.
Yeah, nice work. Any discussion on the motion?
Hannah actually seconded it online.
Any discussion on the motion? Any questions? Otherwise, Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let's begin with Rick Stevens.
Aye.
Angel Dupré-Bouchard,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
Hannah Berman,
Yes.
Angela Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Good discussion. Thanks for your points. I think,
Thanks.
be curious to see how it plays out. I want
Yeah,
to keep track of this one.
We are too. We've tried this lots of different ways, and we think this is a good option. So we appreciate your help and the flexibility. That's going to help us get this thing moving forward, so it's not empty forever.
Good luck. Hopefully we won't see you in.
Yeah, exactly,
years.
3 years. Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay, next up, we have item 7B, resolution number 45, series of 2024, resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, adopting a 2025 Arts Capital Improvement Plan. Michelle and Sarah.
Good evening, Council. Staff is, the Basalt Public Arts Commission, also known as BPAC, is pleased to introduce the draft 10-year Capital Arts Master Plan, also called the CIP. This was something that the council had identified a need for in the creation of creation of BPAC in 2015. If you want to go to the next slide, James. The Arts CIP is intended to guide the acquisition, placement, and promotion of and investment in public art. It contemplates a variety of creative mechanisms for obtaining public art, both in the short term as well as the long term. And it lays out a 10-year plan that will guide the BPAC's work plan and steer the town in the direction of achieving its long-term public arts goals as defined by the 2020 Basalt Master Plan, as well as the Basalt Strategic Framework. Next slide. The BPAC and staff worked for many months on this, refining the draft plan, which includes identifying the role of the art CIP, defining categories of art, so permanent, temporary, performing, those types of categories, developing criteria related to public art pieces as well as location sites, and identifying areas throughout Basalt for the prioritization of the differing types of the public arts. Next slide, please. The Art CIP also explores various mechanisms for obtaining and funding public art to maximize public art opportunities with a restricted budget. So there's a few examples that we've explored. First two are more traditional. The first one being open competition. This is a very traditional method. A call to artists is released, artist is selected, and engages in a contract with the town. The second being the annual BPAC grant program, which has been a very successful program since its inception, particularly in the last year. This is a program that provides small grants to local artists and nonprofits for arts-related projects and programs. And so these both require direct funding through the town. So some less traditional methods that staff and BPAC have contemplated. The first is tied to the grants program, and this would be launching a BPAC grant matching sponsors program. So this is a way to stretch those BPAC grant dollars further and recognizing sponsors of that program as patrons of the arts. We know that we get more, at least last year, gotten more applications than we were able to fund. So this is a good problem to have and a way to really extend that program. The next would be an arts consignment program. So this would be art that is on display within the town for a particularly contracted period of time, available to be purchased by the public. This is similar to arts programs that you might see in coffee shops or restaurants or things like that. We also contemplated an arts exchange program, and this is a way to swap art with other communities for a designated period of time. It's a great way to highlight new artists into the town, and it also creates relationships with other communities and programs. And lastly, we explored the donations or loans example, and this is where folks, really want to either provide us with a piece of art, or it's on short-term or long-term loan to the town. There is a sculpture that is in Lions Park near the end of Midland Avenue, near the stage. It's called Enlightened Seeker, and that one is actually something that's on long-term loan to the town at no cost. Go to the next slide, please. So the BPAC is also interested in a couple of other items. First is pursuing a designation as a Colorado Creative District through the state. And then there's also other arts and cultural district designations that would be really worthwhile to explore. And a designation such as this will elevate Basalt's identity as a creative arts community and increase the town's eligibility for grants and additional funding for the public arts. And the last item is developing a scholarship for graduating Basalt High School seniors who are continuing their education in the arts. And this would not only support burgeoning young artists, but also solidify Basalt's reputation as a dedicated champion of the arts. Next slide, please. So this is a graphic version of the 10-year plan that is proposed within the CIP. It would begin years 2025 through 2034. This implementation plan does guide the BPAC's work plan over the next decade. Understanding, of course, that there may be a need to pivot and reevaluate depending how programs, play out. But the CIP does provide the space and the opportunity to do so. The plan also directs the BPAC to review their accomplishments each year against the CIP and to bring that to council for discussion at the end of the year. So at this point, staff, we're interested in getting feedback from town council on the plan. If the council is interested in adopting the ARC CIP at this time, you may do so by making a motion to adopt resolution number 45, which is found in the packet. And at this point, with just that overview, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have or hear your feedback.
I think this is awesome. This has been in the works since I started. So I really appreciate you guys working hard on this and having direction and having thoughts on all the different things that have always been concerned through post and through you guys. So great work. This is really cool to see, and I think it's an awesome roadmap to the creative art district and everything you guys want to do. So kudos.
Yeah, I appreciate all the work you guys done as well, and I really like that there's performing arts in this. I like the categorization in general. I think it's good to have like kind of a game plan as far as what you can do, where, and all that. But definitely on the performing side too. So this is going to be a nice plan to have to work off of. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
I reflect back on things like the statue of the children in front of Alpine Bank and the fly fishermen on the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that started, quite a while ago. And one of the things that was emphasized was, and this came from the Washington Post, was the idea that Basalt was a quintessential mountain town, and that the environment and that the location, the geography, the terrain, the culture was a critical mass of what we really believed was art. That was filled with creative people. I'm speaking on behalf of my son a little bit because he actually has sold several pieces out of craft, so with Dree. But one of the things that struck me with the Midland streetscape improvements was the emphasis it brought to the buildings on Midland Avenue, which is why it got the label of a quintessential mountain town. And just a aside to that column in the Washington Post, the real estate values jumped about 25% after that came out. So there's a give and take here a little bit between nature and some of the places that we have in the riparian corridors and things that have been offered up as locations for art and other ways to surprise people, I think the phrase was in the plan. And I just want to make sure that there's a balance between what we have thought of as the reason why people are here and what we can do in the way of amenities to keep people here happy, and then to also bring new ideas and creativity to the town. But sometimes it can tip one way or the other. So I just think it's important that gets fully vetted so that we don't find ourselves overwhelmed. Midland is a great experiment, I think, for the community to see what is that going to look like next year in July when it's finished, and how much more can we layer on that streetscape before it becomes, distracting is the right word, but overdone. And the same thing happens with signage, right? And I really like a couple of other examples are the bridges in town that were constructed over time, and the signage that Nick Aceto created for the Midland Avenue extension by the post office. Those things to me are really reflect, the culture in the town. So that's just my point of view. I think this is great. I just think it needs to be well managed and well thought out so that it maintains a good balance in the community.
Absolutely agree on that. I think that there's a lot of checks and balances within this plan for thoughtful consideration, and something that might have been identified as a priority area the temperature may shift and it might not feel right. Another thing just to bear in mind is that this, the BPAC is a reviewing or a recommending body to the town council. And so I don't think the BPAC would have the ability to go kind of hog wild without having some check-ins with the council on placement and items and big purchases, of course.
I think it's great you've inventoried all the locations and the parklets and all those things. And you go around here and the kilns is another great example of the structures that are absolutely fantastic in their own right, so, yeah, I'm all in.
Mayor, I move that town council adopt resolution number 45, series of 2024.
Second, and say more murals. Storage Unit Carbondale. Those murals are amazing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Can I say just one thing? Sorry, I want to say one thing. Just if there's ever any opportunity, like if you had more than one, large scale piece or something from a particular artist, pieces that, resemble one another that you can tell, that they're related in some way. Just any time you had the opportunity to have one of those, like in Old Town and also in Willis, just would be so great. Just, to kind of connect the two areas of town, just to visually see like, oh, I recognize that art from over on this side of town and this side of town. I just think that would just be so wonderful if you ever have the opportunity.
That idea has actually been discussed with our BPAC. I love that idea, just getting that more cohesiveness to both ends of town, and those, we could describe them as bookends.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. Yeah, they'll be happy to hear that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So we have a motion on the floor, and let's go ahead and, Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let's begin with Angèle Dupré-Bouchard,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
Hannah Berman,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
and Rick Stevens.
Yep.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, next up, we have a special event activity permit, tree lighting events December 6th and 13th. That's Michelle.
All right. Every year, we have 2 tree lighting events. Ooh, these are nice and loud today. The first and second Fridays of December. December 6th, we'll have our traditional event in Triangle Park in the Willett side. And then on December 13th, another Friday, we'll have the event over here in Old Town, which we are going to have a block party to celebrate the substantial completion of Midland Avenue. These will have all of our traditional favorite things, opportunities to take photos with Mr. and Mrs. Claus, s'mores stations, Aspen Mini Donuts, the Lions Club pancake wagon for hot chocolate, and those sorts of things. Some new and exciting things that will be part of the Midland block party. We'll be closing Midland from Alpine Bank to Sotheby's to have that block party for from 3 to 7, which is why it's a special event activity permit. During that time, we'll have live music as well, which is really exciting. Holiday market. We're also expanding some of the opportunities for some of the non-retail spaces to have holiday vendors in there. So you can imagine some of our newer businesses have lots of space for that. And then this fun fiber art called, we're calling it Doll Up the Bollards. And it's doing knitting pieces that go over our new bollards to kind of christen them and welcome them into the community. It's a thing apparently in Europe, and so we're going to try it out here. The Chamber of Commerce is hosting a storefront decorating contest with prizes as part of it, so it'll be very We will also be starting the Basalt Tree Pageant December 1st, running through January 6th. We had lots of school participation art classes last year and awarded prizes, so we'll be advertising that. And then Ryan told you about the Basalt Holiday Market at Takaw, which is not part of this permit because it doesn't close parking or streets, but our Sunday market staff is stoked because we had over 80 vendors this year, and they want to come back and provide holiday gifts. So all things holiday happening, coming up, all the things. But most importantly for you, the request to approve this special event activity permits. These were reviewed by all of our agencies and recommended for approval. So happy to answer questions.
Traffic will go through the BCC parking lot, right? Is that?
True.
Okay.
Yes, through traffic. Through traffic will be available, and also anybody who needs to go to the bank on that Friday will be able to go to the drive-through at Alpine Bank.
Cool. I love holiday markets, and so this is so cool we're doing this. I think it's going to be like exceedingly fun. And the glue wine could be sold out of the restaurants. Just make sure, I know because we're not doing a liquor license, the restaurants, it's really easy to make.
Somebody needs to make sure that David has.
Yeah, Dave's
Get your-
gonna
get your-
blue one.
We have,
Party.
You guys get a lot of play.
we have asked the restaurants to participate in having some sort of special during the event, so you never know. Maybe glue wine will be one of the things. Yeah.
We'll have that at the house as well. Yeah, it's like, that's awesome. It's gonna be really fun. Thank you for doing this and teeing all this up. We can't wait. Any other questions or comments?
Mayor, I move the town council approve the special event activity permit for the December 6th and December 13th tree lighting events
Second.
and holiday events.
It's been moved and seconded. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let us begin with Ryan Slack,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
Anna Berman,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
Rick Stevens,
Yes.
and Angel Dupre-Bouchard.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Awesome. Next up, 7D, public hearing and second reading ordinance number 22, series of 2024, an ordinance of the town of Basalt, Colorado, approving amendments to the municipal code, section 16416, residential inclusionary housing, and 16417, commercial linkage requirements, and amendments to the town's community housing guidelines to add income categories 0, 4, and 5. James.
Thank you. As the mayor indicated, this is a public hearing and second reading of an ordinance on the code amendments that would change section 16-416 and 16-417, as well as amendments to the community housing guidelines. And specifically, as was discussed at the last meeting, the amendments that are proposed would add an income category 0 to serve those families and individuals making up to 50% of the area median income. Also adding category 4 for those making between 121 and 150% of AMI, and then a category 5 for those making between 151 and 200% of AMI. As was noted at first reading, the housing study recommended adding the categories 4 and 5 because there were gaps in the town's income categories that were identified, and people making up to 200% of AMI can't afford to purchase or rent housing in Basalt that's free market. Bach recommended adding the category 0, and so that was incorporated for those making up to 50% of AMI. At the last meeting, council asked staff to have EPS, the town's housing consultants that worked on the housing study, do some examination as to whether category 0 would have unintended consequences with the mitigation system. And so they ran several development scenarios and felt that adding the category 0 would work well in the town's mitigation averaging system in terms of rental units averaging not more than 100% of AMI, and then for sale units averaging not more than 120% of AMI. And EPS felt that it would balance out pretty well on most development programs. So they thought we would still see some category 4 and 5 units likely, even if you have the category 0. Also, in looking at some other communities, APSHA actually has a category that is for people making 50% or less than AMI, so this would be similar to that. So in total, Bach recommended approval of the proposed amendments. The P&Z also reviewed the amendments and were supportive. So this evening, staff recommends asking any questions you have of staff, and then taking public comments. And if you're comfortable, you could approve the ordinance on second reading.
This is thanks, James. This is a public hearing, so I will go ahead and open the public hearing. Anybody would like to come up and speak? Looks like we don't have anybody online or in the rooms. We'll close the public hearing and open it up. Questions or comments?
My only question / statement is on category 0. If you do a for sale of category 0, the likelihood that someone is making 50% of AMI and they could afford this place, they would hopefully work their way out of 50% AMI, and now they have an amazing deal on a house. Something just doesn't sit right with me on that, because there's no checks and balances once you buy it, and it's just this, to me, it's a slippery slope, but that's just me.
Maybe if I could please address that. The council still has the ability to basically approve of whether units are rental or for sale. And so if a developer is proposing some category 0 for sale units, that would be the council's potential to maybe steer them towards rental if they're looking at that low of category. That would just be staff's response.
Sure. Similarly, if I can, the recommendation here is that for sale units average 120% AMI, and that rentals average 100%, because it's highly unlikely, unfortunately, that somebody making 50% or less is going to qualify for mortgage. So there's that differentiation as well.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, I think financing would be the biggest hurdle there, so it doesn't seem like ownership would be likely to begin with.
And so they just have to hit a mix. Like in theory, they could have 4 units at 5, 4 units at 1.
Yes.
But they get to choose that. Or
They
is
do,
it-
and they get to now as well.
Okay.
It's just that we had, with only 3 categories, the incomes were really more constrained, and now that we've added, or we're proposing to add 5 and 6, now you're going to potentially catch a few units that are for missing middle, if you will, and then because you have more opportunity to get more sales revenue or rental revenue from those upper categories, in theory, the developer could afford to do this category as a couple or 1 category 0 unit. So it just helps you catch more of the span.
In a condominiumization scenario, that would probably be bought by a business, maybe renting that to somebody. I mean, is that
Well,
that kind of, with the financing challenges?
Sure. Well, and that's why you want to have that average, because the bank would want to see that you're going to have this average income from the sales.
Yeah.
And so, but it is highly unlikely you're going to get financing for a category 0 for sale unit.
This might be off topic, but the effort to buy down existing properties and deed restrict them to an RO category or to category 4 or 5, what prevents the person from scraping that and replacing it with a bigger home if they determine that they can move up the wage earners ladder.
Sure.
So that we start to see an 1,800 square foot house that's on, into this voluntary buy down deal, and you get a good deal on it, you buy it, and you end up renovating it to a 3,500 square foot house and selling it for twice what you paid for it.
I think it's a great question that we could absolutely address when we come back later with that topics. That luckily that doesn't apply to the category 0, 5, and 6.
Right.
There's appreciation caps in here as far as what you can sell it for, right?
Mm-hmm. So you would tie that to 3% or whatever it was, and then 15%?
I don't know yet, because that's a different program that's not
Okay.
related to these categories, but we'll be looking into that
I'm just trying to
next
think
year.
of the end around that we're seeing so much of.
Mm.
Okay.
I appreciate that, looking into the unintended consequences of the EPS. Glad that, that there's nothing there, and thankful for Bach for calling it out. Seems like it's a good thing to add, so.
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt ordinance number 22, series of 2024 on second reading.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let me catch up with you guys. You're just whipping right along here. Okay, let's begin with David Knight,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
Hannah Berman,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
Rick Stevens,
Yep.
Angel Dupre-Bouchard,
Yes.
and Ryan Slack.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Next, we have item 7E, public hearing and second reading ordinance number 20, series of 2024, an ordinance of the town of Basalt, Colorado, approving amendments to the municipal code section 1824, sustainable building regulations to revise type 1 PV solar system regulations to address exterior uses of energy. We have Michelle and Mitch.
You want to set it up and then I'll give them the details?
It's a deal. This is second reading, and just in case for anyone who didn't hear the details on first reading, the proposed amendments are to the town's sustainable building regulations found in Chapter 18 of the Basalt Municipal Code. The proposed amendments reflect the advancement of Holy Cross Energy's achievement of approximately 90% renewable power supply by the end of 2024 on an annual basis. This achievement was formally anticipated in 2030, and as such, the sustainable building regulations currently include requirements for new residential construction to have required PV solar offsets. With the 90% renewable power supply from Holy Cross Energy, who services all of the town of Basalt, the residential PV solar offset requirements are deemed unnecessary. PV solar is a main component in achieving lower HERS scores. Amending the PV solar requirement necessitates an adjustment in the required HERS scores and are indicated in the attached amendments. The proposed amendments focus on external energy use, such as snowmelt, pools, spas, heat tape, exterior heaters, fireplaces, and garages, requiring a PV solar offset. And again, these are for uses that are not essential. These amendments are strictly for type 1 construction, so for single-family homes and duplexes. And with that, I am grateful to have Mitch Miller, our Chief Building Officer, to answer the details of any difficult questions you want to ask him.
All right. Here you go.
Sorry, Mitch.
This is what we have here. Just want to mention a couple of the scenarios that we came up with, trying to figure out how to keep our sustainable building values about the same. When we have all this solar, our HERS rating, all our compliance paths are based on some sort of energy rating. And so they have to rise because the PV just drops them down completely. So I've taken as much data, whichever you prefer, and I'm still working on a lot of this to finalize and get it real detailed of what we've got to put that at. Right now I have, with the all-electric, we go from a HERS 40 to a 52, raising it up. And basically what we're talking about is insulating thermal envelopes, windows, whatever building components are put in there. But when you get into the HERS rating, you bring in your appliances, all sorts of different equipment that goes with it, heat pumps and so forth, that are all electric. So with the electric, I raised it to 52, and with the gas and electric, I raised from 40 to 52, and the electric went from 45 to 55. These seem reasonable. I put them on the low side just so that we could have a better handle on keeping our values correct. Another thing we work with is res check. We run into it at Stotts Mill quite a bit. Everything's under 2,000 square feet. They're not required to have a HERS rating on it. So right now we're 5% better than the prescriptive. Once again, all the thermal envelope. We may be talking about raising that percentage better than prescriptive to make something happen. And as Michelle called out, the reason we would be putting renewables on a house is for exterior energy use, so that it supplements usage that we really don't want to use in this town. That's about it. You can grill me whatever you need to. I hope I can answer.
That was good. Good explanation, and I don't have any questions, but anybody else have questions or comments on this one? Actually, before we do that, let's do the public hearing. So I'll open the public hearing. And I don't see anybody anywhere online or here in the room the rest of the night. So I'm going to close the public hearing, and now you guys have questions or comments?
I guess probably more question statement. This was basically just taking away, like, if you put a bunch of solar on your house and didn't have a bunch of the stuff, it could get your HERS rating down. So we're trying to, like, eliminate
We're trying to
that.
keep the value of the house as tight as we're getting them, and the energy components about the same or better.
Do you know what the cost is to convert a home from gas to full electric? Yes.
You're talking an existing house?
Yeah.
Well, it
To be
really
code.
depends on the age of the house, obviously.
The appliances and.
Yeah.
How big's a bread box? Yeah.
35-year-old, 1,800 square foot, all gas.
Well, if it has an attic and a crawl space, it would, you would probably be looking at, all electric. You're probably looking at $15,000 to $20,000. You're looking at equipment, work from contractors, and that's just a vague estimate. Don't hold me to that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know, I'm just curious, and then appliances and et cetera, converting on
Yeah,
top of that.
because your major appliances right now are boilers, run gas,
A
you know,
little
your
less
heating
than I thought it was.
systems, your
Well, it
ranges.
depends. Because it depends on your energy service too. It depends on your
Well,
panel.
that too, you know, being a master electrician and a contractor for a long time, most of the residences within 1980 and above have plenty of
Yeah.
electricity to them. You know, if you get back to 70s and down to the 60s, now you're looking at new service, and that's a whole nother target we talk
When
about.
you see snow melt and a water feature and a heated, yeah.
Well, then we're gonna charge you a rent fee.
Yeah, and you're gonna be up at the 400 amp service, so, anyway, just curious.
What are you seeing out there as far as heat pumps and conversions and things like that these days?
We are seeing some heat pump conversions. Quite a bit of the new construction is using the new heat pumps and trying to utilize that type of heating right now. There are a few that still want to use the gas. It's still allowed, so they can do that. It's, you know, I probably would say about 25% of the jobs that are changing heat or upgrading their heat probably go with electric at this time.
Good to know. Anybody else? Otherwise, entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt ordinance number 20, series of 2024 on second reading.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let's begin with Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
Hannah Berman,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
Rick Stevens,
Yep.
Angel Dupré-Bouchard,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
and David Knight.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next item up is 7F, public hearing, resolution number 46, series of 2024, resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, adopting the annual budget for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2025 and ending December 31st, 2025, and summarizing expenditures and revenue for each fund. This is Doug and Ryan. The big one.
Well, now we're back on track here, so I can.
Wasn't Doug. Are you trying to use any more of your time?
Nice try.
You're behind already.
I'm behind already. So we have a second reading here. We did do the first budget reading in October, and I'd like to just really look at this Exhibit A, illustrating the differences between what you originally saw in October and what you're looking at today and being asked to approve. So that top line going across is the proposed budget as of October, and this is the projected revenue that we had of each fund. And I'll just go through the changes by category to get to the final budget numbers. So really, we didn't do a lot. We added a little bit to permit fees. Our road and bridge revenue went up a tad. The significant piece here is that the Inflation Reduction Act had some refundable credits for the solar project that we had done for the school, for the solar roofs, for the Roaring Fork School District and the Public Works Building. So we have already filed the first leg of the tax return to actually receive that money. We did the filing just, I don't know, it was like a week ago. And there'll be another filing that we do in 2025. So barring any change to that piece of legislation, we would be anticipating another refund for that project.
Do we get all that, or do we split it with the school?
It would be all ours. Right. And then below that 340 is the savings on the actual credit. This is just utility savings that run through Holy Cross. And we do split that with the school, net of the fee of maintaining the actual units. So really, we're taking our revenue up from just growing across the board here at $20,553,000 was originally proposed. We're now at $21,066,000. So we're taking it up by about $500,000. Then moving to the proposed budget expenditures, we were at $24.3 million, just adding the funds from general fund of $12,444,000 going across. You see our total expenditures are $24.3. We didn't do a whole lot here either. We have realized some savings on some bids that we did for the ADA work that's going to be done, our ADA ramps over at Willits. We're going to do a boiler replacement here in the town hall, got a number for that. The Stotts Mill resolution that was approved, I think it was last meeting or a week before last, where we took the original estimate for the construction of those two units was like $1,778,000, and I think the number that we signed off on with resolution 44 was more like $2 million, just north of $2 million. So that delta is what we're amending the budget here, or at least showing a difference between what was originally proposed and what we're finalizing it at. And then we also have a south side tank, some work being done there. We were able to secure a bid that was significantly lower than what we had originally budgeted. So all in all, we're taking our expenses from 24.3 and we're going up to 24.5. So a slight increase, really tagged to the units that we're constructing over at Stotts Mill. So the headline here is that the proposed budget, revenue less expenditures, on a consolidated basis was, again, October was $3,803,000, and now I'm suggesting that the budget be $3 million as a use of funds, $3,444,000, so a net swing of $358,000. So really asking for $358,000 less than what we initially proposed. And that's principally because of the credit I'm taking from the Inflation Reduction Act, less the other items listed here. So that's kind of how I kind of looked at, just summing up the differences between the two. If you want to go to the next slide there, Justin.
There is a next.
That was
slide.
good.
Is there?
That was good timing.
Can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just a
I didn't
minute.
do that.
What's that? Yeah, you got, here we go. So this is a good summary, I think, big picture wise. Just showing where I think our numbers are gonna be, really basically 6 weeks from now. Having our general fund number be $12.3 million, our revenue restricted funds being 8.8, pardon me. Capital construction funds having across the board here is that we have fund balances of 34.6, showing budgeted revenue of 21 million, expenses against that 24.5, which we just saw. So total use of funds of 3.4, and really a lot of that still is just the capital construction fund, and that's really driven by the construction of the homes over in Stotts Mill and winding up Midland. And so total use of funds of $3.4 million for the budget year. So I think that's where we're going to net out, make some adjustments along the way. I will say that the pages were like 101 pages, now we're 108 pages. We had, if you recall, we did our audit presentation, we had filed with the Government of Financial Officers Association Certificate of Excellence Award that the town received for financial reporting. So we received that award and anticipate getting it again this year. We're going to go this next step here this year and apply for the Distinguished Budget Award. Okay, so it's just, again, just adding more credibility, more meat on the bones here about what we're doing, and have some more exterior recognition for the process we're going through. The idea was just have greater credibility. So I'm going to go through the process, and I basically just told you what time it here was. I didn't tell you how we got to the time. And this program that we're going to be signing up for and the award that we're going to be seeking requires us to actually memorialize the thinking and how we went about doing the numbers, the process. And it's maybe a little tedious, but it'll be more pages to the book. So what you're seeing today really probably won't, I know it won't be what we actually submit as a finished product. And we have like 90 days from the time we get it approved to get the final budget submitted. So I just say that so that you know that what the finished product is still evolving, but the numbers won't change. Some of the language around it and the processes and things, just spirit of transparency, what you're going to be seeing. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, we applied for that, financial reporting. We didn't get it the first time. So I don't know if we're going to get it this time or not, but we'll give it our best shot of getting that award.
To document, like put Visio diagrams or some kind of descriptions of like.
Talks about, how we came up with
Yeah.
our goals, our strategies, our processes, our priorities, some of the risk factors. I mean, we haven't gone through, some of these initiatives in Aspen now have been finalized, so they're going to close the airport when they extend the runway. They're going to have, maybe the closing of the bridge. Those things are going to affect revenue on some of the out years. So some of those things, more detail, some more meat on the bones about what some of the things that are going to affect revenue and expense. They're big into the organization's big into presenting a structurally balanced budget is really. The idea is having recurring revenue equaling our recurring expenses.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, we're there, frankly.
Yeah, philosophically, that's what, in practice, I think that's what we pretty much do.
Right,
So-
right. So it's just really kind of showing them more of the, they're going to come in not knowing anything about it. So you got to really just draw them a picture and give them more words.
Show your work, kind of,
Yeah.
basically.
So there'll be a bit of a lift, but, we're doing it. We'll see where we net out. But I just wanted to just tell you that since the final budget book will probably be 150 pages, not 108 pages.
Sounds interesting.
I don't know
It really,
about
no,
Listen, I just encourage you to find another $1 million like you did this year.
Another $1 million?
Under promise, over deliver, Doug. Keep it up.
Yeah.
We love it.
Yep.
no.
I
Cool.
motion to 170.
We got to do a public hearing on this one. So I will open the public hearing. No one's coming up. No one's online. I'm going to close the public hearing. Anybody have any questions or comments at this point? Thanks for putting this all together and kind of the reconciliation from the first view to now. It's helpful.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 46, series of 2024.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let's begin with Hannah Berman,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
Rick Stevens,
Yep.
Angel Dupré-Bouchard,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
and Dieter Schindler.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Where, I don't know, I was going to say, where are you going?
Right.
You just get
It's Item 7G, Resolution Number 47, Series of 2024, Resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, appropriating sums of money to the various funds and spending agencies in the amounts and for the purposes set forth below for the Town of Basalt, Colorado, for the 2025 budget year. Doug and Ryan.
Right, so I don't think this is a public hearing on this
It is
one.
not.
So what we're basically doing is, since we just approved the budget, we're just memorializing the certain numbers that we had as uses of fund for the general fund, restricted fund, and the various funds. That's in your packet. I will say that I did make a mistake on one of the conservation trust funds. In your packet, the current operating expenses was listed as 15,000, it should be 25,000. So the total appropriation for that fund will be 225,000, not 215,000. That was my mistake, I didn't catch it on my final read. So it was like the last freaking number. So there you go. I just have to, so we can fix that when we actually circulate the resolution, assuming that it's passed.
Then you could, the council, when they make their motion, could just acknowledge that change.
So that's all I have, is really just listing out how the money gets appropriated.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 47, series of 2024, with the edit of the $225,000 on the conservation fund
Versus
line
250.
versus 250.
Second.
I did just see something else flipping through. The restricted fund says total general fund. I think it's on the second page of the ordinance itself.
Yep.
So,
I'm sorry?
can I add that? I'll add to the motion, just fix that too. That's probably.
So moved.
Is that?
Yeah.
Label.
On page, yeah, I see it. When it goes through the funds, it says restricted fund, but then it says total general fund instead
Oh,
of
sure
total
does.
restricted fund.
In the ordinance, so just make sure you clean that up.
They
Yeah, no
fired
worries.
my administrative assistant is really not good. I used to
Doesn't
have people that-
Copilot do
I
that
used
for
to
you?
have people do this stuff for me, but now I have to do it, so
Good approval.
no telling.
Cool. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. So, Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let's begin with Angel Dupré-Bouchard,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
Hannah Berman,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
and Rick Stevens.
Yep.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Doug. Next up is item 7H, public hearing and first reading ordinance number 23, series of 2024, ordinance of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving a minor subdivision to adjust the Alpine Bank property lines to incorporate a portion of the Alpine Bank property into the Midland Avenue right-of-way, 137 Midland Avenue, Basalt, Colorado. James Lynn.
Thank you. As the mayor indicated, this is a public hearing and first reading of an ordinance on an application submitted by Alpine Bank and the town of Basalt, requesting to do a minor subdivision to adjust the lot lines of the Alpine Bank property at 137 Midland Avenue to incorporate a portion of the Alpine Bank property that includes Midland Avenue streetscape improvements into the town's right-of-way and to remove it from the Alpine Bank property. This was a request to kind of get rid of some of the liability associated with that. In association with the ordinance, there's also been a requirement to provide for a driveway easement for the existing driveway around the Alpine Bank building. And so those are the requests related to the ordinance. The Alpine Bank representatives could not make it this evening, but town staff can answer any questions you might have. It is a public hearing, so staff would recommend taking public comments and then providing council discussion, and staff would recommend approving the ordinance on first reading. Jeff, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'll add just a couple of comments. As council may recall, you approved an agreement that preceded this, that kind of laid out, here's the plan here for the Alpine Bank property. So there's a portion of the property includes Midland Avenue, streetscape improvements, and historic improvements. And for a lot of properties, we've acquired easements for the town's benefit to utilize those areas. Alpine said, we'd rather just give you the property. And so we had an agreement where Alpine granted the town a license for the construction area to allow us to use and make the improvements until we were able to accomplish this of doing the lot line adjustment through this plat. And then there'll also be a deed and an easement that go along with it. So they're conveying to us this area that's as right-of-way that has functionally been used as right-of-way for decades, and now is as part of the new project, and then reserving a driveway easement as part of that agreement.
Thanks for that explanation.
Sure.
This is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. I'll close the public hearing.
Not getting a lot of takers today.
Pretty straightforward to me. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Mayor, I move that town council approve ordinance number 23, series of 2024 on first reading and continue and set the public hearing on second reading for November 26, 2024.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, so Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let's begin with Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
Hannah Berman,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
Rick Stevens.
Yep.
Angel Dupré-Bouchard,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
and David Knight.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
All right, 7I, continued public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 11, series of 2024, an ordinance of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving a minor subdivision slope review, community housing review, and site plan review to subdivide 168 Original Road into 2 lots and for the construction of a new single-family residence, Basalt, Colorado. James, this is yours.
Yeah, thank you. As the mayor indicated, this is a continued public hearing and second reading of an ordinance on an application submitted by Michael Fox. Michael's here this evening. And it's requesting minor subdivision, slope review, site plan review to subdivide the property at 168 Original Road and construct a single-family house on the lot to be created. As discussed at prior meetings, the property is 168 Original Road. It currently contains approximately 0.9 acres and contains a half a duplex with the other half being on the adjacent property. The property is zoned R2 and has some 30% slopes. As has been discussed several times with the council, they're proposing to create 2 lots out of the existing, one to include the existing half a duplex, and then a second lot for the construction of a single-family residence of 3,000 gross square feet. And there have been considerable discussion about the discussion items that were identified and considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Be happy to answer questions or go into any of those if council has questions. But at the last meeting, the council approved the ordinance on first reading and set a second reading date for this evening. As was noted, the applicant amended the house design to reduce it down to 3,000 square feet so that it would qualify for the community housing exemption. And that has been included in the ordinance. And so this evening, staff would recommend taking any applicant comments that Michael may have, taking public comments because it is a public hearing, and providing council discussion. And once again, staff would be happy to go into any of the discussion items if council has questions about them. But we would leave it for Michael to see if you have any additional comments on the application.
I have no additional comments, but thank you guys.
All right, let's open the public hearing. I don't see anybody and still don't see anybody online. So close the public hearing. And I don't have any additional questions or comments today, but is anybody else?
Who owns Original Lane?
Who owns it?
Is it a right-of-way or is it a private driveway?
It is a private property that has an easement on it. So it's kind of a joint easement, I believe.
Yeah, it's owned by 3 properties. The Broughton property, Scott Broughton was here, owns the majority of it up to our driveway, and then he subdivided off 2 properties in 2017. They have a piece of it as well.
Scott Broughton had to make improvements to Original Lane when he did his subdivision to do turnaround and extend water and sewer.
No one has anything, I would entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt ordinance number 11, series of 2024 on second reading.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let's begin with Ryan Slack,
No.
David Knight,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
Hannah Berman,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
Rick Stevens,
Yes.
Angel Dupre-Bouchard.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
Thanks for your patience for
Thank you guys.
getting to the end of
You
the
guys spend so
meeting.
much time doing this. Thank you guys a lot. So.
And with that, I will adjourn. I'll hit the gavel so everybody knows. Turn the TV off and whatnot. Susan.